Hail, brethren. I've got Mr. Dan Marshall from the UK here with me. This is our third time trying to record this clip. Here we go. My name is Rohan Kumar Paul, and we've got Mr. Dan Marshall from the UK, and we're going to be discussing. Dan, take it away, brother. Talk to me. What are we talking about?
Well, something that's kind of blown up literally this week that's very dear to my heart, as it's basically a couple of writers, Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, writers, creators, pioneers of imagination for me in both the work they did for TSR, Dungeons and Dragons, and creating the world of Krynn, known as the Dragonlance setting, and also the series of books and novels, games, whole series of material they produced that just ignited my imagination as a kid. And I think it's important to talk about the predicament they face. They're currently involved in a very, very serious, very large lawsuit against Wizards of the Coast, who, as we've covered on the show, they currently own the rights to Dungeons and Dragons and have allowed certain practices and certain control factors to impact upon the creativity that really should come from Dungeons and Dragons, and the whole. And how it's affecting the imagination of people. I mean,
so you and I both, let's backtrack. We both grew up, right, in the Dragonlance world, right, the world of Krynn, which is the universe of. There's 3 moons in this universe, in this world. Right? Am I correct there? If I remember correctly, it's been a while since I read it, but I grew up with this stuff, Raistlin and Cameron and all the characters, the Kender, right? This was
These were fantastic characters, and what was beautiful about these characters, I think, was that when you first pick up the Dragonlance Chronicles, not only, here's a little bit of something that I imagine most people that are familiar with Dragonlance are aware of, but these characters were rolled to play in a module that was written. I believe Tracy Hickman was the dungeon master. So Dragons of Autumn Twilight, their first novel, an incredibly successful novel, a brilliant novel, was literally a module that was role-played, as was I believe the second book and the third book. These were role-played. These characters were rolled and created, and they are the essence of Dungeons & Dragons. They were behind the creation of these modules. They then actually played these modules with their colleagues and friends, and turned those adventures into the novels we now hold up as legendary. And the characters themselves, what I found particularly appealing, I think I read Dragons of Autumn Twilight when I was about 6 or 7, and what was particularly endearing about them, these weren't necessarily heroes, with the exception of Sturm, who really he was the knight who really struck the kind of classic trope or archetype of a hero. But even he had complexities. He was a knight, or playing at a knight. He wasn't a real knight, he was pretending. But all these characters were everyman. They were regular people. They just wanted kind of living their lives. They were troubled. They had struggle to overcome. They had potential and power, but they had to overcome their struggles in order to embark on kind of heroic endeavor and to face the evils of the world. And that's another point, and I think it's the most significant point with the Dragonlance, is the philosophy that underpins their writing. The writing of Weis and Hickman, I think, when you look at it, it's very much a philosophy of harmony that you feel from it. The idea that everything has to be in the right balance. In the Dragonlance world, they talk of the cataclysm, an event where the gods destroy the world because the force of good is too prevalent. It becomes arrogant. You have the king priest who seeks to control, morally police the world, and then you have the Dark Queen walks the world, and it's a time of brutality and murder, and both these kind of extremes are seen as negative. Good and evil in their extremity are negative. Even the evil characters that walked Krynn understood the need for balance and harmonious discourse on the actual world, and it's something that underpins. Particularly, and it's very relevant. It's a very relevant message in the times we face today.
Right, yeah. In today's political climate, where We've got people who are so extreme on both sides, and funnily enough, we find ourselves in a situation where the creators of the world of Krynn, right, of Dragonlance, who actually inspired you, right, if I'm not mistaken, here to become a dungeon master yourself, right, a professional dungeon master, which means you just spend way too much time thinking about fantastic realms, right, and getting us all absorbed into them. You've written you've written an incredible module for us that we're playing through, and man, this is the world of fantasy, and that kind of thing has now. I mean, we're faced in a place where fantasy realms are being policed, right? And this is what's happened to Dragonlance. They're being policed. The fantastic is being policed.
To use a very, I suppose, in reference, it seems like the King Priest of Istar has penetrated Wizards of the Coast, and now you have moral policing. I read about sensitivity coaches literally dictating to people who created this world, created this legacy. This sensitivity coach is dictating amendments to their imagination, control measures. In fact, this is unbelievable. Weis and Hickman wrote a rich world with many different cultures, many different peoples that were very determined by the places they were from. They didn't feel the need to insert Chinese aspects into their book because there is no China on Krynn. Krynn has its Ansalon, its Palanthus. Mm-hmm. These are cities of many people. The races are human, elf, dwarf, kender, draconian. They're not dealing in issues of subdivision. Mm-hmm. It astounds me. So now you have, as I say, these extreme measures, literally cutting out these people that created this franchise. These are people
they're cutting out the very people, right, who created it. That's what they're doing. They're cutting out the very people who created what it is to be in the world of Dragonlance, right? And they're cutting that right out. Them out.
And let's just highlight how important Dragonlance was. I mean, when you think in the late 80s, fantasy trope, all the, you had He-Man, right? Okay, I know, admittedly, it was targeted for children, but the film had just failed. The franchise was ended. You had Conan. The third film in the Conan franchise was cancelled. John Boorman, famous English director, was down to actually film a Lord of the Rings film, but that got canned. It was seen as unfilmable. Fantasy was in a really tricky situation, and obviously you had also the right-wing SJW movement of the 80s that sort of cancelled Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons was still reeling from the reputation and the damage to its reputation that happened in the 80s. That it was basically satanistic, etc., and I don't know if many people remember that, but Weis and Hickman came along for TSR. They literally created this world. They were commissioned to create a setting. I believe the Forgotten Realms world was actually already in function, but it hadn't really caught on at that point. But because of the success of the Dragonlance books, the Dragonlance modules, it ignited the embers of this, into a furnace, a burning fire. It captured the imagination of so many people. I know many people who weren't necessarily into Dungeons and Dragons who read the Chronicles and loved them. They played the computer games. I remember that one of the first Dungeons and Dragons computer games, or RPGs, was Heroes of the Lance on the ZX Spectrum, a side scroller. But it had the same, the fundamentals of Dungeons and Dragons were in there. Your characters had stats. It kind of worked with the Dungeons and Dragons kind of gaming system. And then you had the gold box games that came out. And I used to, as a kid, I'd be always reading the books. I'd finish the Dragonlance Chronicles. I'd be straight onto the Legends. I would then go back and read the Chronicles again. It was a constant cycle. This really captured my imagination. It gave me purpose as well. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I would do chores for my family to earn pocket money to buy the next gold box game, just to explore this fantastical world they created. And now they've been stripped of this. They've written 3 books, 3 sequel books, kind of like I suppose they wanted to do sort of like a love letter to their fans. To basically, they're coming to the end of their careers, I guess, their writing careers, and they're wanting to do these 3 books to sort of as payback to the fans that supported them. And you'd think Wizards of the Coast, they bought this property from TSR, etc. They should be kissing the feet of Weis and Hickman. They should be laying out the red carpet. Doing the whole reason that property is anywhere near the worth it has is because of the work they did in the 80s to put it on the map. There'll be no computer games. There'll be no. D&D would not be as big as it is. Second edition exploded in the 90s. The Forgotten Realms. They understood then how to market the Forgotten Realms. You had guys like R.A. Salvatore and sort of writing novels in Forgotten Realms. Those novels probably wouldn't have happened if Dragonlance wasn't so successful.
If I may interject, gentlemen, you brought up the fact that Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, they were influential in the 80s and basically starting all this. And what they did was they influenced a whole new generation of writers. You mentioned how they portrayed Dragonlance. It was a world of balance, right? And so what that enabled it to do was you were able to root for the villain in certain cases. In certain cases the villains were actually good guys, right? And so they flipped the script on people. It had never really been done before, not like that, right? And so I hate to make it about me, but I'm one of the people they inspired, because now with Vestige, my world is a lot like what they would have created with Dragonlance, where it's a world of balance. Not always is the hero, not always is the villain the villain. There's circumstances that arise in situations where the script is totally flipped, and I feel like they are the ones that really kind of started that.
I agree, Gat. I mean, I think back to the character Dalamar, the Dark Elf, who works with Tanis Half-Elven in the Dragonlance Legends to prevent Raistlin from destroying the world. He's an evil guy. He's ambitious. He seeks power. He wants, but at the same point, he realizes there has to be a world within which he can operate. That's not being torn apart by fundamentally diametrically opposed ideologies. You can have evil and good, but they have to be in the right measure. So you had discourse between characters of different kind of philosophies. If their motivations were in alignment, they would work together. I mean, it's visionary. I mean, it kind of presented a world where there was communication between different parties, and it's messages really that are missing in our world today. Where everything is partisan and polarized. As I say, Wizards of the Coast, you should be laying out the red carpet for these people. You should have treated them like royalty and allowed these books to be. Not only are they're the reason why you're in the position you're in the first damn place, but also they have a message that is very much needed, and it's a message that is prevalent in every different trilogy or setting they had. There's a similar kind of setting of harmony, similar kind of message of harmony in the Deathgate cycle. It's throughout their books. The character of Fizban, for example, kind of appears in most of their series, but it's a kind of different character, but representing the same kind of ethos. And I think it's something that again, it's something that's missing, and why they want to kill that. It astounds me.
I actually love the Deathgate cycle, man, and I remember the tattoos and the not the maze, but labyrinth, right? They're lost in there. Yeah, man, fantastic. We were talking about that earlier, man. I want to reread the Deathgate cycle again. Fantastic series.
Well, that was a fantastic
I read
series.
that as well. That's where we were discussing what was the main character. He was a runic mage, right?
That's right.
Haplo with his dog. Yeah.
I love that. I love that series, dude. Yeah, I didn't even realize who wrote it, but yeah, I read that as a kid.
Yeah, there you go, man. This is what's right now. I feel like the legacy, and not only that, the legacy of Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, but also just they've taken something from the fans. That they've taken something from the readers, right? From the people who got into Dungeons and Dragons, who continue to play, the people who built this hobby, I would say, right? By actually playing it and being so involved with their passion and the rest. So I would say, what? I think we'll leave it at that today. But if you can say something to Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman, Dan Marshall, what would that be, brother?
We're there at the portal to the abyss. We're standing beside you, and we're going to close that abyss. We'll not let the cataclysm happen. There must be balance. Hail Margaret Weis. Hail Tracy Hickman.
Hail, brother. Hail, brother. And that's the war campaign signing off today. Hail, brother. And we had a special guest appearance by Gat Hanzo the Wizard. Hail, brother. Hail, brother.